Let's get this out of the way right off the top. Alden Robinson's Sneakers is one of the most criminally underseen movies of the 90s, maybe of all time. Sporting an airtight plot, a phenomenal cast, and splendid direction, it has been relegated to cult classic status as opposed to just plain old classic status. And while there's nothing wrong with being a cult classic,
Are you ready for the dim sum bar?
it's just when a movie is this good, it's always surprising to find out so few people have seen it. Well, we're here to change that the best way we know how, by cracking the code of what makes a great movie so special. So boot up your supercomputers and draw down the shades, because you never know who might be watching. So let's find out what the happened to this movie. In the event you're one of those folks who's unfamiliar with the film,
like how?
Okay.
or just need a refresher, let's delve into what Sneakers is all about. And by the way, if you've never seen it, go ahead and do that, then come on back. Sneakers concerns an oddball group of crafty security consultants whose job is to break into computer systems of big companies in order to suss out their security failings. Typically eccentric, this crew consists of hackers, former government officials, and reformed criminals. Their latest job sees them trying to obtain a mysterious black box that holds the power to crack through every single encryption system out there. The ultimate codebreaker. Naturally, the gang learns the folks who've hired them are not who they seem, and they soon find themselves in way over their heads. The cast is excellent, with Robert Redford never better as the unofficial leader of the group, Sidney Poitier as an ex-CIA official who acts as the pragmatic father figure, Dan Aykroyd as a paranoid conspiracy theorist,
Cattle mutilations are up.
David Strathairn is a blind sound expert who sees more than anyone else, and River Phoenix as a former student adept at getting himself in and out of tight situations. Ben Kingsley joins the show about halfway through as a mysterious villain with ties to Redford's past. And Mary McDonnell brings some feminine class as Redford's on-again, off-again squeeze, who of course gets wrapped up in their shenanigans against her will. We are telling you, this is a perfect cast in a movie that gives them plenty to do. So how did it all get started? Fittingly, a movie with a plot as convoluted as this one took about 9 years to get made. The idea originated with screenwriters Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parks, who wrote the 1983 hit War Games. During their research into that film, they stumbled upon a real group of people known as sneakers, who are hired to break into corporations in order to test the strength of their security.
Larry and I had, during the research for War Games, had heard about sneakers as being the kid programmers at IBM, as opposed to the brown shoes, they're the sneakers. And I remember we were at a computer convention in Chicago, right around the time we were making War Games, and we found an editor of some obscure little engineering magazine and asked him, were there any sneakers around?
And he got very kind of hush-hush and looked around and he said, yes, I have. He said, how do you know about them? And I said, well, we've heard, and I knew he was talking about something different. And he said, they're also called black hatters. They exist in the black world. And I said, what's the black world? And he says, the world in which no information comes out, only goes in. I said, oh, okay, tell me more about this.
He described sneakers as these peoples, these teams, often described as black hatters. I'll wear the black hat, you wear the white hat, or tiger teams that are hired to break into the installation teams that are hired to break into top secret installations. They might be military, government, private in terms of banks. And he described them as a subculture made up of computer hackers, ex-criminals, security experts, telephone freaks who would band together in teams and use their disparate abilities to break into places. And it just sounded like a natural for a modern caper movie.
They had some of the basics of the concept set when they were hired to write a different film, so they asked their friend, another writer named Alden Robinson, to work on Sneakers while they went off to do something else. Over the course of the first year, the three would meet constantly to do research and gather ideas. Their research would lead them to real hackers and security people who would go on to inspire some of the characters in the final film. We won't get into every story meeting they ever had, but let's just say that over the course of 9 years, the three eventually cracked the narrative that would become Sneakers, even as it took something in the neighborhood of 30+ drafts to get there. Robinson didn't initially want to direct, but his collaborators eventually coerced him into doing so. At the end of 1989, the writer-director was coming off of the huge success of Field of Dreams, which would end up being a much bigger cultural phenomenon than anyone had foreseen. Suddenly, Robinson had real clout in the business and could get Sneakers made. Sneakers was originally set up at Paramount, but ultimately moved to Universal, the studio behind Field of Dreams. The film's success, of course, would hinge on its cast, which would eventually consist of a combination of huge names and veteran character actors. Getting the leading man right was crucial, because even though the film is an ensemble, Martin Bishop is the true beating heart of the film.
Give him help. Be a beacon in his sad and lonely life. Can you do that for Gunter?
Originally, the character was pictured to be in his 40s, around the same age as Robinson at the time, and so the director compiled a list of all the big stars in Hollywood who might fit the bill. At an Oscar party for Dances with Wolves, an agent approached Robinson and revealed he'd shown the script to Robert Redford already, and the actor was excited to do it. Robinson was initially mortified, thinking the 50-something Redford was too old for the part. But he reread the script while picturing the iconic actor as Bishop and fell in love with the idea. Of course, the fact that Redford starred in a couple of the greatest paranoid thrillers ever, 3 Days of the Condor and All the President's Men, made his casting that much more fitting. The movie evidently came together quickly after Redford signed on. Robinson asked Poitier, whom he knew a little bit, if he was interested, and the actor agreed immediately after reading the script. Dan Aykroyd similarly loved it and agreed to do it, with one catch. Aykroyd wanted to play Cosmo, the villainous figure from Bishop's past. Robinson informed Aykroyd he wanted the comedian to play Mother, the conspiracy-obsessed ex-convict. Aykroyd was insistent he play Cosmo.
Okay, we'll listen.
But when Robinson told him he had Ben Kingsley in mind for that role, Aykroyd agreed to take on the more comedic part.
Hey, ho, ha, ho! Hula, hula, hula! The bula, bula, bula!
Ironically, in real life, Aykroyd and his brother Peter are big conspiracy nuts. And during the Sneakers commentary, it's revealed that Dan would entertain the crew with bizarre theories that were much more outlandish than anything his character could come up with. Dan alleges his performance as Mother was based on his brother. River Phoenix took on the role of Carl Arbogast soon after wrapping My Own Private Idaho, which was apparently a very difficult experience for the actor. So he wanted to do something a little more lighthearted and fun. David Strathairn took the role of the blind whistler very seriously. According to the audio commentary, Strathairn actually attended a school for the blind in order to study the movements of blind people. While on set, he would walk around with his eyes closed, feeling around and getting to know the lay of the land in order to accurately portray how Whistler would have to get around on his own. The beloved character actor Stephen Tobolowsky has a small but pivotal role as an employee of Kingsley's. When he was first sent the script, Tobolowsky scoffed at the title, thinking it was going to be a bad sports comedy. But after reading it, he told his agent he knew what $100 million at the box office reads like.
Am I right or am I right or am I right? Right.
In an article for Slate magazine 20 years after the film's release, Tobolowsky confessed he'd never had so much fun on a movie, and he lovingly geeks out about sitting at the first table read with the star-studded cast and getting to improvise his very amusing scenes with Mary McDonnell. The film was shot on the Universal Studios lot, The opening sequence, a prologue featuring younger versions of Redford and Kingsley's characters, was shot on the famous clock tower set from Back to the Future, while the interior of the Sneakers hideout was the same stage that would house a gigantic T-Rex for Spielberg's Jurassic Park just 1 year later. Incidentally, those two young actors who played young Bishop and Cosmo actually met with Redford and Kingsley for a day to get their mannerisms and personalities just right, in what was surely a thrill for the two younger thespians. One of the key supporting characters is a mathematician named Gunther Janisch, played by a young Donald Logue. Janisch is the man who creates the code-breaking device that everyone is after, and he was based on a real computer scientist named Len Adelman. Adelman actually wrote much of Janisch's dialogue, and even contributed to complex figures that are projected onto the wall behind him during his first appearance. This scientist was offered money for his work, but he responded with a counteroffer. He and his wife would get to meet Robert Redford. The producers agreed, and he and his spouse were allowed on set during the Janisch sequence. One day on set, Robinson was approached by a couple of mysterious and ominous men who claimed they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence. They were there to inform him that he was not to, under any circumstance, refer to a handheld device that can break through all of the world's many encryptions. Obviously, the little black box is key to the movie's plot, so this was alarming news to the director. Lucky for him, he eventually learned the visit was a hoax perpetrated by one of the film's cast members, though it's still unclear who that perpetrator was. Before the picture's release, Universal sent a computer disc to film journalists that contained press notes, cast biographies, and images. This was evidently the very first digital press kit in the history of movies. If you received one, you had to hack your way through it to get to the information. But the story goes it was intentionally very easy to get through, even for press folks who weren't very tech savvy. Furthermore, Phil Robinson did a press day on the internet via CompuServe at the PC Expo computer trade show. Yes, this was in 1992, the very early days of the World Wide Web. Obviously, the technology in the film seems pretty quaint now, but there's no doubting that its themes are still relevant today. As Cosmo tells Bishop at one point, it's not about who has the most bullets, it's about who controls the information. Sneakers was ahead of its time, because it knew that everybody's information would eventually be up for grabs, maybe even at the click of a button. When it was released in September of 1992, Sneakers landed in the top spot at the box office with $10 million. It eventually cleared $50 million domestic, making it a modest success. Its reviews were mostly positive as well, but the film didn't seem to make much of an impact until some years later, when die-hard fans of the unusual caper movie would end up finding out with great relief that there were other sneakerheads out there. People who can quote the movie's dozens of memorable lines by heart, and who appreciate a good old-fashioned comedic thriller with an excellent ensemble. Nowadays, the movie would be filled with all kinds of action and gunplay, but Sneakers gets by on its wits and charisma, just like the characters. In 2016, it was revealed NBC was working on a TV series based on Sneakers, with co-writer Walter Parks on board as producer. Unfortunately, that adaptation never gained traction, and so far hasn't gone before cameras. We would have been down for a sequel years ago, but clearly the door has been closed on that possibility for some years now. That being said, it's comforting to know Sneakers can't be seen enough times. As Bob Redford can tell you, the classics never really get old.